Welcome back to Detection Dispatch, the show where we do not sugarcoat what is broken in SecOps today. Today, we've got an episode that is going to deep dive into the question that all of us, I can assure, are facing, and that is, are your alerts really shit? Because the only answer is ever really yes. And so if you're still drowning in false positives, or if you're letting real threats walk past all of these superficial filters, no AI in the world is going to save you, and SOAR is not going to save you either. So I recently mapped this brutally honest SOC decision map, which I encourage everybody to check out. Maps all the key decision points that us as leaders have to keep up with and undergo in the turning or transformation of raw events to events of interest to alerts down to a real incident level. And we get to a certain point, right, where we're making sense out of our alerts, and we have to ask ourselves, are our alerts really shit? And the answer is really only yes. With me today to cover it, I've got Dennis Chow. He is Director of Engineering SecOps at UKG and the author of Automating Security Detection Engineering, which you'll be able to get today on Dispatch for 20% off with a special code that I'm going to pop open here. He's obviously the run of the show, building detection pipelines and architecting homegrown solutions in his SOC. So Dennis, thank you for coming on. It's been a long time I've been trying to get you on the podcast. How have you been? What have you been up to? I think I saw you speaking at the Wisdom conference, and what are you working on?
Yeah, I've been a lot of travel, honestly, doing a lot of different things, pretty much telling the audiences, hey, AI security, hey, AI security, AI security. But in the meantime, in the last year, I've taken over the SOC. I'm also leading detection engineering, so I'm leading both teams. And we're moving towards a lot of different maturity levels. So we're busy upskilling the SOC. And detection engineering is also doing the BAU stuff. But more specifically, we've been building this AI agent, and it's multi-AI, agentic, multi-clustered. There's a bunch of context window things and all these other challenges we've faced. And we're about to hit the production button on that. So we've got it in the staging right now. We've got scalable where it can actually do about 7 minutes of investigation with thorough analysis. And we're on the cusp of replacing L1, L2 modern talent here. And we're doing limited containment soon for high fidelity use cases. So more than happy to talk a little bit more about what our challenges were and how we worked through them. But yeah, that's pretty much the crux of it so far.
I am so excited to get into all of that because you're coming out of an episode where I think they're in the early stages of that, and there's even a lot of lessons learned there, but it's so crazy to see this in up level in maturity. But what I want to do is I want to unpack with you this sort of these things that we're up against, right? Is the alert dissection, and if you've got it handled at the AI SOC level, that's fantastic. But I don't think everyone quite does, right? Because if we still have to manage the precision versus recall, it's the most important SOC trade-off today. And once you do, maybe you are ready to go AI SOC or not. So I want to talk about when maybe someone is, the difference, and also I want to get into the emerging of the different models I've seen these AI SOCs take. Okay. Some are mainly on the triage only piece of it, whereas some of them also handle the development of your detection as well. So I can't wait to unpack that all. But first and foremost, I think you should answer the question, Dennis, does your SOC, are your alerts really shit there?
Wow.
Are they?
I mean, to my standards, I will agree. It is not up to my standards, so I won't use the S word here. But I will say, yes, we have a lot of room for improvement. There, just like every detection engineering group or traditional group, we've come from the SOC, and so a lot of us create these indicators, and they're great for a time being. And we have a lot of them, and a lot of them still are relevant to our craft, like TTP-based items that have lull bins, but they have a finite amount of maturity in terms of being able to be stretched and usable elsewhere because we were trying to reduce the computational time on scene. And so for me, the reason why I think those detections are not so good is because they don't adapt very well when we make significant changes on the red team side. So if I make a Dennis detection evasion using modern Gen AI, I create polymorphic payload, right? That just calls upon itself and makes different iterations. What am I going to do? There's only so much regular expression combinations that you can expect realistically a team to create a useful high signal to noise ratio alert. So that's why I think that's modern SOC right now is still struggling with that, because the SOC part is the intense use of precision versus that recall. And so, but for recall, you have a bit more forgiveness in the analyst, because we have to have all this crazy information about the industry and the total amount of skill sets needed. So not just applying your conceptual skills of hardening OSs and what it might look like and what's possible, but also the tools and how to use them in the enterprise level. And so that's why I think this is where we're having that issue with detection. So yes, it'll continue to suck as long as we're doing indicator, what I call lowest hanging fruit ones, which are emergency patches. Here's your regular expression-based search, essentially, set or grep with scene rules, and then you keep going with that. But we're not doing the data science foundations, which is statistical-based outliers and things of that nature. And that's when I think you can finally say your detections suck a lot less, but you'll still have a lot of lack of precision if you're not correlating them correctly over time, and that requires a lot of data science engineering work.
A lot of data science engineering work, and what I also hear from that is a lot of skill set. I think it takes a very advanced type of detection engineer to create the just right Goldilocks amount or level of precise detection rule. And because there's not so many, I mean, not everyone can hire the best of the talent. The more junior analysts have to just deal with just creating generic detections, or just kind of the out of the box stuff that come with the SIM, or maybe not as much custom development. And that's where this trade-off always happens. It's like, should we create so much precise rules that we miss out potentially on something real, or we just deal with the volume, right, and just get inundated? The AI SOCs we're starting to see are literally targeting that problem, we can make sense of all of the L1, L2 alerts that are an output of those generic detections. But you're right, starting and fixing the problem more upstream in the detection engineering. If you don't have the detection engineering right, you're left in this volume of noise. And AI SOC in that case is, you're investing in like a faster way to be wrong. So it sounds like you really have invested in really building out a good detection engineering foundation in your SOC.
Yeah, so we were also guilty of creating a multi-agent thing going on systematically, trying to patch the issue. So, Dylan and force multiplying the analysts, right? And so when you look at today's analysts, you need to know that, 15 years ago, you could get away with endpoint network and then maybe web. Now, web is a part of that too, but you also need to look at cloud infrastructure, so landing zones, big data, right?
It's a new attack surface.
ETL, warehousing, and then eventually you need to get to data science foundations and then AI engineering. You can't just start up here and then come back all the way down here, because you're skipping so much of that. So because that level of recall is needed, what we're seeing in the modern industry of SOC analysts is that you've seen other influencers, right? So they're telling you have 6 figures, you take this boot camp, and then you're good. I'm like, no, you're not good, right? So
No.
security used to never be entry level type of place, and so now that we've kind of come to this, well, we needed to scale security, we've made all these entry level people, we didn't help them skill up where we needed them in experience. So that's kind of where we're patching it with AI now, and we need to move them towards a different level of skill set. So to answer your question, yes, you're right. So what I still think is valuable is that force multiplication portion of it. Now, the cool side is that you'll see these LLM wrapper startups, and they have really nice interfaces. Don't get me wrong. They might have really good customers. They might be proof of concepts. They might have whole things going on with them. But at the end of the day, they're just an LLM wrapper just like everyone else. They will almost never tell you who their data scientists are. They will never tell you about evaluations. They don't talk about context management. It's a deer in the headlight look. And so really just build this yourself, right? So there's tools out there now that wasn't available a year ago when we started on this. Like ADK was not there, A2A and MCP protocols were also not there. So your implementation of this is critical. So I think we still need to patch things based on getting more time to analysts. So getting them from an average of 15 minutes to an hour of deep investigation time for that final validation, and then finishing it out with escalations if needed. all the way to like making sure they have 80% of their time for skill sets and upskilling for there, and that way they can become decision makers and subject matter experts. On the flip side of that, on the detection engineering side, yes, we could take the continuously not so great detections, but you can learn from them, right? So when you think about them and you're linking that taxonomy, create it like a graph database, right? For instance, or if you're doing the whiz thing, do the whiz thing. You're putting TTPs to threat actors to indicator-based detections, and they were great for the time, right? They're high fidelity for that reason. You need to have k-means clustering and all these other things to forecast what's next based on your threat actor activity. So get with your CTI program managers and really understand what that looks like. And once you do that, you can actually, and I hate to say the word AI again, you put that back into an agentic pipeline, and you have it start creating suggestive TTP-based indicators, because now you have, in theory, that compute. So if you're building agentic AI, you're probably in the cloud somewhere. You're probably not doing this on premise using even Olama on your local N5, right? That's just going to take forever. So, use your cloud capacity to scale out and get those TTP-based detections. Get your first 20 in, and then that's really solid for the time being. So you can actually generate TTP-based detections based on the historical indicator detections. So there won't be the S word anymore. You'll get some better stuff going on, and you can focus on your DE people becoming true DE people, where we're like on that cusp of research, but we're not researchers.
Well, you've said in the past that you can't use AI and ML to dress up weak detections, but you're throwing K clustering all over the place. So where is it? You should throw it before the detection itself, or just as an explainer, because I think right now, as a result of it, is the wrong
Yeah,
answer.
I think there's two paths you can take. You can take the long path, which I just explained, where you have the what I call the bad detections that became bad, but they weren't bad. They were temporally good. And then you turn them into behavior-based using the detection engineering agentic pipeline. So that's a longer term haul, and you have to really understand how to do multi-agent well, which I think that's what goes back to the SOC issue. Build that one first, and then you have the patterns for the retrofit there. So the secret sauce to any multi-agent, by the way, for anyone listening, is evals and memory handling. Like, you cannot put every single contextual window and just and hope that you're going to get an entire investigation done in a single context window, or even multi-shot. Right? That's just not going to happen. So back to the other thing, I would say the second path is where most teams can actually get to. Let's say you're using Splunk, right, or SecOps, whatever.
As many people do.
Yeah, right. And then hopefully you're getting off QA or whatever. But like, use risk-based or informational events instead of creating direct alerts. And then don't generate those alerts raising to the analyst until you've done the correlation of that. So use the ML type signals, right?
Yeah.
Progression or, k-means clustering, whatever you may have that signal based on something that you can link to another indicator using your indicator-based detections, and then combine those together. And then once it raises to a certain threshold, where you kind of have like a UBA, but a chain of what I say composite detections, then that's when you can create a full alert to the analyst that's high signal to noise ratio. But keep in mind, if you're not having them actively retroactively hunt asynchronously, you're going to miss out, right? So there's plenty of things that evade those high fidelity detections, whether you're combining them or not, purely only on risk. All you're doing is reducing the volume. So if you're reducing the volume, you have to have readiness in terms of skills for analysts to be hunters. And that's a whole different level of upskill that you have to invest in as a people leader.
So I really think a lot of SOC leaders are still in denial about their alert quality. But as you were just describing how you're MLing your detections, is there a particular data set that it's better applied in? Because I have found that many, or even myself and many others have said as well, that the machine learning UBA type of use case is a dying field because of just the unnormal, almost unrealistic way to try to baseline something that is so hard to baseline in the current circumstances of remote work, or I don't know, the startup biz, or contractors going in and out. It's just not a normal baseline anymore. So I'd be very curious what kind of data sets these old school machine learning algorithms are working well on.
So there's two that I think that are underrated. I think so. Identity,
Okay.
right? Identity, not access necessarily, but identity CRUD on authorization. And then that gets
Okay.
you to the link to the data security side. And what we use is canary tokens over here. And so as you're triggering these web bugs, whether you're using Thinks or whatever you may be using, you're creating those indicators. If you can make that into a two-dimensional like pandas frame, then you've got yourself an ongoing data set and stream of normalized items that you can do that calculation against, whether you're doing it inside your scene, like Splunk, you can, deploy all these apps if you have the SVCs for them, but or you're doing directly out of like your cloud and bring that stuff back into your scene. So I think that's still room for that. The other thing that you got to keep in mind is as you're building traditional ML, there's advantages and disadvantages. The advantages is if you're building ML, they also make a great use case for helping to secure monitoring runtime agentic AI drift, so the Gen AI side of it. Because LLMs are just like what I call entry-level college students or interns where they may not know everything, but they have the aptitude in theory, right? And if you tell them line by line
Yeah.
exactly how you want it, you'll eventually get
Yeah.
them to do something semi-deterministic, right? So that's where
They ask ChatGPT to explain it to them like they're 5, and then they
yeah,
get on
right.
board.
Like once you attach like tools to them, they're essentially virtual versions of new entry level talent, right? And so that's the reason why we're seeing all this less than ideal situations for the newer graduates, stuff like that, because we're finally figuring out how to do more LLMs using the agentic kind of workflows. And so I think that's where you can get the most return on investment out of the traditional ML stuff. People doing the endpoint stuff, the process stuff, authentication where they're just like signing in. People work differently. Like I'll be traveling and I'll get some things sometimes from my SOC, right? And then it'll be like, hey, did you actually travel? And I'm like, yes. But did you infer this other stuff? And that's the harder part where you still need the human. And that's why I think people look away and steer away from ML versus going to the indicator driven stuff because there's the volume to human analyst inference problem that we haven't addressed via skills and productivity and throughput.
Well, there you have it, folks. That's definitely a way to make your alerts suck a little less, but still we haven't talked about when it's time to automate. When what metrics matter the most for your alert health in the stock, so that maybe it gives you a good indication when it is time to automate. So I'll ask, what have you gotten to a point where you're well, you said there's still some work to do with your alert quality, but you're at a comfortable, manageable level. Is there a point where you are trusting automation to remediate it, like to completion? Or are you still kind of have the human in the loop into it? Are metrics a part of that story?
Yes, definitely a high linkage of metrics to human in the loop on that. Admittedly, we're closer to automating a lot of the L1, L2, almost approaching L2 of the entire
Okay.
queue with the agentic AI side because we finally figured out how to scale analysis. On the detection engineering piece, because we have the ability to push more CRUD to prod, we have to inherit less trust. And so even when we take that pattern and put it into our own detection and engineering pipelines, what we're measuring are, I would say, the top three things in my work. And I don't know if Zach Allen agrees with it. Who knows? Obviously, there's
Who knows?
it
Oh, is that a shout out to Zach Allen?
is his weekly newsletter is actually packed in with some good stuff. If you're actually watching this, but so there's obviously the basics, right? Signal to noise ratio based on true positive, false positive, but there's also positive benign, right? And so I don't think a lot of stocks are tracking that because it is something that a false positive means you shouldn't be alerting on it ever, either incorrect logic or there was something weird in the data normalization that caused it to act as an edge case maybe. Benign positives are something more like, yeah, Dennis did something weird and we should still continue to track that as a risk, but it's not something that we need to call it a threat yet. So those three are necessary for sure. And getting below a certain threshold is one way, right? We try to aim for like 80, 85% whenever possible, and then closer to 75%, 70% when we look at ML-based stuff, or anything related to the word AI. Because our expectations are lower, every 5% is a much harder grasp. The second thing is the deprecation lifecycle of detections as a whole is that we don't look at threat intel widely enough. So and this is something that we're still working on ourselves, but we have projects that we have actively and aggressively working towards that pipeline, and we actually integrated one of the two things I need already. The first of it is we use SafeBreach as our BAS to help us keep informed, and although BAS feels like it seems less of a thing now that we have agentic AI, it still has all that subject matter expertise, it has the APIs, it has a very good platform, and it has research, right? Threat research from like Unit 42 and many other conglomerates that actually build those payloads and provide them for you. And so we actually test against those combination of TTPs to see what the relevancy is for for that detection in the future or the current state. So we partner with the CTI team here, and we look at their top TTPs based on what is likely to attack us for this fiscal year, and then ideally over a period of time, and we match it against them to see if we have that coverage. And the answer is yes, and we continue with that as part of that consideration. The thing that we need to focus more on as an industry, and something that we're still working on, but that'll be part of the second book that we have in spring, is that forecasting what's going to occur in the future based on prior data and prior knowledge. You have all this great data, you need to use it. So you have to create, I had to say, another agent to go ahead and help you forecast and predict that and see what is needed as your gap. And then you have that generating based on, multi-shot in that pipeline, and you have your get runners, and then you create the pull request, right? We're not going to allow it quite yet to go ahead and push, but we are going to do regression testing, completely detecting this code stuff, plus the threat pipelines and whatnot, and forecasting as we build that closer into that same pipeline that we talked about in the past, which is like expediting your detections as detection as code. And so if you add that to your pipeline, not just in terms of unit regression, but regression and threat-based informed, that is where you're going to get the true value out of it. Now, I don't know what that pattern looks like for trusting an AI agent yet. I think we'd have to create some serious RAG going on. And even for us, we're having difficulty with basic SOC RAG-related items just to make sure that they are meeting like 80% confidence and meeting an accuracy level to that's acceptable for most of us. And so doing that for DE is like a 10-factor fold issue, and so that's going to be a little while for us. Or maybe someone else smarter than us figures it out ahead of time.
Well, it's great that you mentioned that, because the previous episode that you're walking up after, they started to create an agentic RAG and started to feed all of their true positive alerts. But as new ones come in, right, there's not, specifically in the case of a DNS filtering, like a DNS exfiltration, not many of those, we don't have that many in quantity, right? So that the agentic RAG index can learn from and know from and have a lot of context about. So it's almost like you kind of have to fabricate the agentic RAG, all of these, what true positives look like. but you don't, they never really happen in the real world. So
Yeah.
I mean, is that going to provide much more noise? Because that's not really real facts.
Maybe, right? Because you also rely on the closest thing you can get. What I think some people are doing is creating like an asynchronous way of saying, thumbs up, thumbs down, right? And you have to create that, and then that adds to these columns essentially on these tables and matrices of where you ingest it into the RAG and how that RAG actually accesses itself at the time of need, right? Is very, very few people create RAGs from scratch, right? And so you don't have control of those algorithms. Let's say you use Gemini and Vertex together, and you're using grounding, right? Do you really control all those parameters and stuff like that? So unless you're building that from the ground up, it's going to be very difficult to control, and then even harder to create evaluations on if you're using someone else's technology. So that's where I think you're having the biggest issues, and we haven't solved it ourselves completely yet either. But I think that's where we need to go if you wanted to get to that next level of I guess true sourcing there. I do think for a long while, as we have high stakes things like detection engineering work, we're going to have detections in the middle. But I think all of our stuff that we do, we can do more asynchronous stuff. So no longer are we sitting there doing our own threat intel research, looking at the relevancy, looking at true positives and stuff like that. That I think can be agenticized pretty easily asynchronously, and then we become decision makers. Much to your point in your slide there.
Well, on the note, I got distracted by the note of Gemini. Have you noticed that it feels like it's had a lobotomy? Like before, it definitely was better before. Now I have to prompt it 4, 5, 6, 7 times in order to get what I'm looking for. But that's not even the point. But are we at a point though, metrics wise? You talked about signal to noise ratio. You talked about false positive benigns. There is a world where it's acceptable, right? So that you are ready for automation, and when you're not, because I think that a lot of leaders are in denial about that, and they're going all crazy on AI SOC. So at what is that sweet spot? Like, when are you ready? When is it manageable? Because it seems like you've managed it. Is it? It's almost sounding like a combination of like all of these different formulas together that's like feeding into your dashboard. And
Well, the funny part is we actually did vibe code some dashboarding with ETL and stuff, and we
did
had to
you?
secure it and do some syntax corrections before that, before we went to prod. But yeah, I mean, we were able to do that with a senior analyst. Ironically, we didn't even need a DE person. So I think so. There's a MITRE 11 strategies of a world class SOC or PDF out there that they've done like a version 2 on. That has a lot of
Okay.
great starter packs for you, like the top 10 or 20. So it's the stuff I mentioned. Let's say you don't have a dedicated CTI team that can
Got
generate
it.
all that stuff for you, and you're not going to be doing that AI engineering work on that side anytime soon. Start up with those metrics first and pick like the top ones that are critical to you. And my opinion is every board or every C level has a different need or different priority. Change those weights. So for every metric that you see, that is a metric input, not the final formula,
Not the final.
yeah, to
Yeah.
your weight of your entire risk. And then you can actually use what I call MBA sprinkling and tie that to dollars based on efficiency. So, for instance, if I'm measuring some form of risk of, all right, how did you, why is ZE prioritizing these sets of use cases and asking for this much money of visibility, right? You're always going to have imperfect invisibility for your data sets in SIEM. Let's say that's going to cost you 500K. Can you actually say, based on those metrics, the SOC needs this level of visibility based on this level of risk? And you don't even need to have your assets. You can still tie potential forecasted risk based on people's time, based on outages, based on efficiencies. And if that exceeds that 500K, that's something you can take to the board that's highly prescriptive, right? And then you would have to do this across all of your metrics, obviously, for your, ideally your budget, and then send that up to your CISO.
And in a way they understand, because it's sometimes hard to communicate this kind of risk to up to the board in this way.
Yeah.
I've found there's an art to
Yeah.
cybersecurity
Yeah,
communication.
for sure. And then and you have the signal to noise essentially here in your
Yep.
items here. I would also say if you're looking for pure DE indicators, right, as far as your
Yep.
eval metrics, I would say not just the analyst signal to noise, but analyst rating of the tool efficiency. How much of the tool for
Okay.
that?
Is that Is that subjective? Is that gut
Yeah, that's
feeling? Because I would rate a lot of Sims these days
Well,
sucking.
well, it is, right? So, like, if your team is also doing your case management, and if the different tools that led up to that detection alert, which ones did better or worse, and which one was more useful to the analyst, maybe they can weight that, right? We used to do those in the
Yeah.
RSA days with net witness, and so
Yeah.
you could do that and have all those metrics inbound to your RAG as well. I think the third item is, and something that I spend a lot of time yapping about on the how, is the threat, right? What is your actual threat? Your threat is based on the vector. So my thing is attack path simulation. So based on the threat vector, how many threat vectors are you getting with this coverage? How
With each detection, like how much can you get with?
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
right. And so you can get more
Yeah.
TTPs for every one use case, right? That's a level of efficiency that you can measure
That's a good one.
operationally and strategically, and then make a determination on whether or not you want to deprecate it or if you go drilling into it more, right? So if you're
Yeah.
a SaaS shop like us, you're going to be going all in on AI, multiple data scientists. So where are you going to be placing a lot more of your detections? Obviously, it's detection based on data, right? And so,
Yeah, exactly.
and not just like the governance and IAM. That's all important stuff, but ultimately it's about your data. That's where our crown jewels are. So that's something you can add into that. So if you're saying the vector is not just internal, but now we are in public cloud, you have to worry about the external stuff. Use some of your other tools like your CNAPs, right? Wiz might give you that toxic combination and say how our detections are covering that, and that's another metric efficiency point that you can use. So that's one that you can use. It's hard to actually get that into a format with normalization where you can automate on that, but if your DE team can do this, or any kind of engineering team can go ahead and do this, you are loads ahead of the competition of the peers.
Hmm. Yeah. I mean, there you have it. You could turn to the data. Otherwise, you're scaling garbage. You're scaling on the basis of an opinion. Right? But anything without data to prove it is just
Yeah.
an opinion, and it's nothing of merit. But so, at this point, when does one go AI SOC? I mean, you said it earlier. AI SOC. These AI SOC startups. in your words, are pretty UIs. But what's the real problem? Like, when should they do it? When should they not? Maybe they've got all the metrics in place already, and maybe it's time for them to do it because they're really dressing up a real nice picture and threat narrative that it's easier to look at than just a bunch of JSON put together.
I think so. I would say caution to all people evaluating AI SOC, no matter the vendor. Make sure you have your evaluations and what you deem as critical, and understand their underlying technology. Sign the mutual NDA, figure out where your data
Yeah,
is actually going, because you're essentially sending potentially compliant or other data or regulatory data because you're part of the SOC to somewhere else. So if
sure.
you're FedRAMP,
Yeah.
are you really going to have an AI SOC from a vendor? I don't think so, right? So keep that in mind. But I would say the answer is yes now. Everyone that has a dedicated security team or has a business that can afford one, at least, you need it. It's just part of the another tool in the tool bag that we have to have. Like EDR became a thing, SIEM is a thing standard now. This is another portion because the adversaries are all using Gen AI, and they were the first to create payloads and all this other stuff. That's nothing new, right? So we finally have scalable tooling, and so that's why I say SOC analysts need to really upskill themselves in the industry. You can't just sit there going, I
Totally.
process and investigate alerts. I'm not gonna lie, nobody cares. So you have to learn to start not just doing that, but building, right? And if you can learn how to build even one-off single agents to yourself that help automate at least 50% of your day, you're doing so much better. I would say the only other traditional portion of that, when to not do it, I would say no. The answer is still a soft yes, but to do it no matter what your level is in the environment, just do it with building and control and caution. But to not do it is also like when to a level I would say you should not even think about the AI SOC agent yet. Is if you don't even have SIEM or
Right.
compute figured out. You don't have data.
Oh, of course not.
Yeah. Now you're never going to have true data normalization because everything's messy, right? Everyone says, "Oh, just normalize all your data, you're good." No, that doesn't happen really in major enterprises, right? We have acquisitions, we have customers, we have all kinds of stuff. So what I would say is, if you're at less than at least halfway through your journey on a semi-mature product where you can have some form of high fidelity alerting, at least of half or two-thirds of your total workload, then it's probably not best for you to start thinking about AI to scale something yet because you haven't even gotten to the point that you have enough signals to scale anything.
The visibility of what you need to be protecting in
Yeah,
place.
right. So minor attack is a good start, but like you can't just come around and say the naive manager is going to say, "Hey, I have 100% coverage, I'm good." Like, right? The
No.
OPSEC people or the actual APTs are actually going to find out one thing that you don't have coverage on, that's related to that TTP, that wasn't part of that map, and they're going to leverage it because they don't care, right? But you have to cover it and be right
Yeah.
at everything. So that's the decision point. I would say if you're thinking about AI SOC or not, that's a very different thing from build versus buy, though.
From what?
Build versus buy.
Oh, that's what I want to get into next.
Yeah.
I think what really separates, real and AI SOC, whether it's homegrown or not, uh, in from this automation theater that we're seeing, both homegrown or not, is the priority levels, right? One, start with the fundamentals, with the maturity in place of a SIM to begin with, the signals, but also if you're going to build your own yourself, which is, I'm thinking about the example of Spencer, who just talked about his agentic RAG use case. They started off with just the things that the SOC hated doing, and it doesn't take anybody's job, because the moment you start talking about this kind of thing, a lot of analysts, a lot of maybe lower tiered analysts start getting a little bit worried, right? So starting with the things that nobody likes doing is not going to hurt anybody. People are going to be very excited about it. It's only going to get better. So that I find that if you're going to home grow your SOC, that is a good place to start. But maybe you don't have the developers in place to build because you need three components, right? You need memory, you need resources, you need compute, you need an enterprise license of OpenAI, because you don't want to be using these open source models, since with all of these prompt injections and now source code rewriting itself with polymorphic injections, right? So it depends, I guess, on your resources, but I would advise to purchase an AI SOC, because they are using these meta models, these protected enterprise models. But it sounds like you've homegrown your AI SOC. So tell us about
So
that, and the realisticness of it.
yeah, so we started like a year ago, more before ADK was out. So before Google released all of
Okay.
A2A, it even started before MCP. So that's how far
Okay.
we've been on this journey. We did the SOAR plus plus thing where we did, some people call it enrichments triage. I don't call it triage enrichments. Triage to me means you have enough information, you figured out how to enrich it yourself, and you validated the actual, true positive, false positive thing going on. So
Yes.
so we didn't do full triage, but we did do major enrichments, and we've saved 8.3 hours for every one day across the board
Wow.
instantly. And we were only operating at, with a bunch of serverless functions and store as a state machine, we were only operating at like, oh, like less than 500 a month.
But did that divert to costs? Like, did you have to pay for more compute because all this is
So
tokenized,
yeah,
right?
in GCP land, we were only 500 a month. Now we did have SOAR already in place. So what we did was SOAR plus plus, which was LLM as a function and enrich everything. So we had unlimited runtimes with SOAR. So we kind of leveraged all of that. So I don't know what the cost of SOAR would be in that regard, but we did save a whole headcount. So if you ever needed to
Really?
justify, well, we need SANS training, or we need like something else, or why do you need to promote these people? Like, yes, we saved a whole headcount and albeit. So the cost of our operations, because we already paid for SOAR, and then even with the additional upload of tokens and utilization and all our guardrails we had to put in there, that still justified, helping everyone get raises and promotions and training that they needed on a reoccurring basis, and it scales 24/7. So I would say that was the start of our journey, and then we went to like a 2.0-ish or zero point 0.2, whatever you want to call it, and we went full ADK. And that ADK, we went fully agentic, and then we got out of the SOAR, and we went platform independent
Yeah.
as much as possible, and we went serverless as much as possible, and we started doing the TCP
Wait,
servers.
you just hit on. So did AI stock replace your SOAR? Is that what I'm hearing?
Uh, Not yet.
Okay.
It does heavily complement it, right? Because now we replaced it. It's not to a point where I think it's cost effective yet. So depending on how good you negotiate with your enterprise security tools, I still think you should have your enterprise security tools with that. Because even if you try to make it an all-in-one AI agent for your place, you're not going to create the tools and the underlying foundational capabilities. Like CrowdStrike has mastered this with EDR. Same with Palo Alto's version of their EDR, XDR, I think. And are you a specialist? Are you a product maker of that? And the answer is no, right? You still buy it. I don't think. Same with SOAR. SOAR is a giant state machine, and security vendors have found a way to scale that in their backend cloud compute, where it's cheap enough for them to offer it to you for X amount. So I would say maximize all your tool space first, and then migrate some of
Yeah.
that over to the agent side as much as possible. But it gets difficult with the multi-agent piece. So start with single agents, and then try to have the SOAR play against your cloud and see if they can talk together, and have that delivered back through your SOAR routines. That's how I would say you should use it initially. And then for us, when we went multi-agent, we were able to scale out. Now, including development costs, we were closer to like 2 to 3 grand a month. And this is not optimized. So this includes development costs, staying in staging it, and multiple reruns. So we're about to push the prod, about to. We have a couple weeks left and a little behind schedule. So we're about to,
When will it go full prod?
sometime in this quarter for anyone in UKG listening.
Damn.
But we are very close. So what we found when it runs correctly without any kind of errors or edge cases that we didn't account for is that we've gotten it down to about 7 to 8 minutes of investigation time, full robust investigation, all MCP tools, even better than some. I hate to say it, even better than some analysts if they're rushing through like a 20 alert per hour kind of workload. But this thing scales, right? It scales up to like easily 100 alerts per hour at 24/7. So now I have eyes on glass no matter how much PTO the stock is taking.
The stock is taking
Yeah,
out.
and then now we do have to have separate workflows to have them retroactively sample and check the outcomes of all the stuff. So it's closing tickets, it's creating dispositions, it's escalating to the next tier when it thinks it needs help. And then we have that confidence level closer to about at 70% right now. We have it at a lower bar than 95%, where you might see a product vendor, for instance, kind of advertise as such. Because we rather have that force multiplier where we're patching what I call bad behavior, but we're freeing up enough time where they can upskill, and then I can have detection engineering focus on the deeper root cause and the harder stuff at the same time. So I'm balancing 10 different fires at the same time. I have water for like 4, and this is what's helping us. And so what we're saving is, at least 2 to 3 fold. So with this, we haven't ran the numbers yet, but based on what I've seen so far and how it's been able to do escalations, full triage, investigation with that, and limited closing and containment for like high ransomware, highly known ransomware type signatures from your EDR, for instance, then we're actually saving quite a bit of time. So we're saving at least 2 to 3 times of 2 to 3 head count of level 1 people, probably another person one other person from a level 2, and probably a quarter of time from a level 3 person. So for some people, that's your entire SOC.
Truly,
For us, it's not there yet, but like it is going to become like a major player in that. And so now I can finally free up people to go, okay, now go master digital forensics and reverse engineering and hunting. And we can finally do that now. And then as detection engineering finishes our scaling and make sure that we have error conditions and all the handling and all the security runtime, we can't be hypocrites. We have outliers that we have to monitor ourselves in a different state. We're actually not in line, by the way, with some model guard items. We have it in line with some of the major critical ones, but we also found, like, even with cloud services like model guard, it adds a huge amount of latency. And so as you're doing these real-time analysis, we have to kind of pick and choose our battles where we think less risk is here versus there. And so that's the challenges we've been facing and working through. But as we're retrofitting some of that in there and just getting this thing to work consistently well, we have the pattern now that we go, okay, we figured that out. Now we can do digital forensic acquisition because we already have a SOAR automation that does a full acquisition in the cloud or on premise, no matter your cloud. And this includes runtime for workloads and the instances. And then because it just becomes another tool wrap, right? So you put an API gateway in front of it, you have MCP server with that, and then you essentially just go out and essentially use the API gateway calling your SOAR, right? So you have multiple levels of identity and access controls and authorization controls. And everything wrapped in a nice little bundle where you can track it in logs. And then we're looking at the tool calls and making sure that in our agentic solution, if someone like our red team, for instance, did a red team campaign and didn't tell us, we can actually see the differences of the tool calls over time based on our everyday investigations. And if it's going somewhere very far left, we'll have that alert to our SOC, and then we can start investigating that. And so that's what we've been up to, and that's why we've been taking a little bit longer than we wanted to for this solution.
Now, I gotta ask, I think it's fantastic that you've relieved your analysts to prioritize more strategic type of work, but have you diverted their workload to now maintaining and supporting your, like, this architecture on an LLM structure or your agentic RAG pretty much? And are they now focused on keeping that running, keeping that working? Because now you have just up-leveled their skills, and they are going to be in high demand across other SOCs, trying to pull them in.
Yeah. So first of all, don't worry, promotions, and we'll work on market optimizations on your base. But I think the more important part is, like, remember, I have 2 different teams. I have detection engineers and I have SOC analysts. So in some customers, and even some of our partners, one is in the same. For us, it's 2 different entities. So our detection engineers now have to maintain all this. So what we're trying to really do is optimize everything, or we're not having to become GKE masters or something of that nature. Like being KA admins makes us sad. And so rather than worry about all that, we're trying to go serverless as much as possible. Our main concern is our spend. So as we're getting every single action on these different CRUD operations, our session and context management of what these agents are talking about doing, and understanding with LM as a judge, operational drift, that's increasing our cost 10 times. And we consider ourselves a slightly smaller solution, right? Because we're not building that new foundational models in this case, and we're not even fine-tuning them. We're just prompt engineering the hell out of them. So that's kind of the secret sauce for anyone listening is, again, evals and memory management. But on the SOC side, they're just now catching up and learning, I guess, the base level encyclopedia of Agentic C and all the underlying technology that go with it. A lot of them are still catching up, admittedly, on things like deeper web apps, deeper cloud and landing zones, because they never had to be an engineer or consultant before. They've never deployed it. So I'm focusing them up, leveling them there. And then remember, when AI engineering, which is where we're at here, a lot of these SOC analysts have a long way to go. So they have a long path towards with that. And so what we're doing is just motivating them to go, there is a path in the future. And I think in the future that when we look at 15, 16 years ago, SOC was everything, right? You had TBM, they were supposed to know everything about governance and that. But because everything has been so compartmentalized now because of all that spread of technology, we can now start thinking about, okay, if AI is actually replacing the entry, the mid, you have to become the subject matter expert. There's no question about it. You have to hyper specialize in today's time. So as you scale up there, you start learning detection engineering and some research skills and some threat intelligence skills and hunting skills. I think we're going to go from a separate set of Fusion Center multiple team models back into a more singular model again. So what's old is new again. And
It's making a comeback, just like
right,
fashion.
exactly right. It's fashionable to be the all-in-one SOC when you have those levels of subject matter expertise. So I think in 5 years, if I had to put my guess on it, if we're at the current rate of change, and the technologies are there, and even faster if you consider like Google Cloud, Azure, and many other vendors are working on these problems that I just described, which is the secret sauce of multi-agent. Once they've solved those at commercialized scale, then we have to be true subject matter experts in our craft as knowledge workers if we want to remain here, right, at our current pay. And so, in 5 to 7 years, everyone needs to become cross-functional detection engineers, hunters, digital forensics people, reverse engineers, and I would dare to say researchers. So we're at that point. I even forecasted this back in, I think, 2016 or something.
Oh, did you?
Yeah. We're in generation like 5 of security. And right now, the highest demand for the big payout is data science and security research work, right? Because Agentic C cannot do that yet reliably, but it's getting there. So in 5 to 7 years' time, if you're not already there and you haven't caught up, as a security practitioner, and you're still trying to debate if you want to become a journalist or start specializing, my honest advice to everyone here is to specialize. And if you want to continue getting paid what you're getting paid now, you have to upskill and become that SME. So in 5 to 7 years' time, become a SME or face either the potential RIF or even a pay decrease. So I think that's where AI is having the dual edge impact of that. But if you can start staving that off now, hedging your bets, focusing on a little suffrage right now, right, upskilling yourself at night and getting beyond your 40-hour work week for a little while, you can finally get caught up and stay ahead and just build.
I like that. A lot of secret sauce elements you've uncovered there, but it sounds because you've gotten a lot of the upstream, right? And if you look at my diagram, you've gotten a lot of the upstream, right? And that has taken a series of cycles and even potentially years, which to me, AI SOC isn't necessarily a product, but a maturity model with a lot of painful prerequisites that you just have to undergo and perfect and get right. And it sounds like you have it under control, and that's great. But I have to also throw in there, what happens when the attack surface now shifts to all of the back end that's running your AI SOC? Did you see this report come in from Google?
So I've been reading a lot of the Google reports. None of this is actually net new for me because we've been having to deal with this all. If anyone's out there listening, the NIST RMF is just a start, but like to apply the RMF, you need OWASP top 10 LLM and the Google Safe framework, and this is certainly a highlight of all this. So we saw this in, I think, Mandiant, right? The Cyber Defense Summit, I think not too long ago, maybe a month or two ago. And this is pretty straightforward. I think you'll never stop actors from using the latest and greatest technology. Like, you're just not. On the flip side is they're also running out of ideas. So if you look at all the zero shot kill remote exploitation with full RCE and root, those MSO8 67 days were gone. So now that we've gotten better at hardening and all that stuff, they're also needing to find new ways of getting to us. And it's almost always stolen credentials, phishing, social engineering. So they're going to get better at deep fake and all that other stuff. On our side, to cover that, that's why you need AI against AI. So if we can finish the foundational, we're always still behind. So if we finish our AI SOC agents with that drudge, you're still going to have that drudge going on, and you start making the analysts become specialized and start fusing their skills, becoming junior detection engineers in the next year or two. Yes, you can create detections that might detect, let's say in this case, the first point of entry deep fake technology, because you might look for the watermarks and the meta, but you'll have to learn how to make strings and then recompile those strings into chunks and then analyze those chunks, just like you would like the old school packet days with IDSs, right? So you're building net new systems to do analysis, and so that's why I think everyone is going to be a builder. So yes, we are behind as an industry. I still think we do from a general practitioner perspective, but if you start making huge strides of suffering right now, learning all the underlying technologies before you get to AI engineering, then learn to make analysts build DE related stuff, become junior DE, we'll be able to detect some of those mechanisms soon. I don't want to say now, but soon.
And that's how you also keep them happier, right? More healthier at their job.
Oh yeah.
And advancing as an industry. So there is a big psychology portion of that.
Yeah, I mean, I honestly believe by the time they get those skill sets, they'll be confident enough to do talks like these, and it'll just be something that you do on a regular basis, because you can't teach an audience unless you know what you're doing the first time, I hope.
You have to practice it. We have to practice what you preach.
Oh yeah.
That I want to give your book a plug, Automating Security Detection Engineering, because that seems like the rite of passage. But before that, I do want to compare, since I've got you, your take on, as someone who has built their own AI SOC, what is your take on the productized AI SOC? Or are you going to productize what you've built? If so, I want to know. I'd love to market it. But the ones that we're seeing out there, I'm talking Prophet AI, Kevlar AI, Drop Zone AI, I think was one of the first, Exaforce. I'm seeing this merge between the ones that are just a GPT wrapper, as you talked about before, right? They just consume alert sources from your SIM, so kind of a requirement for you to have a SIM first. And then they just kind of explain what happened, what they think happened. No really different than pasting your alert, all of your alert details into GPT. Just a nice, pretty UI. But then there's also these AI SOC with detection and triage that could potentially be a replacement of your SIM. They're consuming the raw events, and they're responsible for the detection logic as well, and then they as well do the triage piece after that. And I personally think that this model is the way to go, because it fundamentally understands the context that is involved in creating the alert itself, the detection logic that is, and therefore it can triage better, right?
Yeah. I think long term, if you're looking only two, I don't even know what the other path might look like yet. But so if you're looking at only these two for now, I think for the short to midterm, yes, the bottom one is what you're probably going to see most of, right? And you'll see this with almost everyone. You think about ReliQuest, 7AI, but even with your company's product, right? Logic. You're shifting left, right? You're talking about the detection engineering side.
We're shifting left. Yeah. Hey, you brought that up, not me. This podcast isn't sponsored.
Yeah, but right, if you look at all these tools, every single vendor is becoming an all-in-one tool somewhere, right? And I think every security vendor is realizing, you have to be the kind of all-in-one tool, because what you do is expensive now because AI and compute, especially with existing technology. So unless we're solving memory, which is that secret sauce I talked about, where you're exponentially increasing that context window, where you're not meeting the hit. So a lot of data scientists and AI engineers are telling you today, with LLMs conventionally right now, 50%, right? Even my shout out to Austin Nowak, which is my data scientist. He helps us with a lot of our performance issues. 50% threshold is what I learned from them, that's saying that you can fill up that context window before it kind of dumps all over itself. And so if we can get past that, right, if we can get the context windows to 4 million, right, besides Grok's 2 million or something like that, and it doesn't fill up to, you can fill it up to 90% before it becomes, unusable. Those are where we're going to start seeing the top portions of your diagram here, where we can start seeing that more often and doing those more complex cases. On the flip side of that is that if you're a smaller shop and you can't afford like a major component like a Wiz or a Splunk team or something like that, you're probably not going to be buying this anytime soon.
No, you're
Um,
not. No, this is not for those teams that are still barely making it out of a sim.
oh yeah,
No,
so
like,
I think you're right.
yeah,
I think you'll see the top part because if you look at the industry trends right now, everyone's becoming the everything vendor. I don't necessarily agree with that, but that's kind of where we're
yeah.
at because
That's called platformization.
exactly right. Because I mean,
Hmm.
your costs have gone up because you have to host something and all this
Yep.
compute. And so what I don't think customers think about is that part, which is why you have to become the all-in-one and why you're pushing it so hard as modules within that. Because I think individualistic, play nice solutions are pretty much gone, right? That kind of left back in generation two of security where we're, oh cool, endpoint and network security was enough. Right now, there's too much data, too much compute.
Yeah.
So that's why, yeah, that one's correct, and I'm in agreement with you on that one.
Oh, I love that. It really is. I mean, you're right. It's fast and it's most teams are settling here because it's fast and this is what they'll if they have the money, of course. But it is very shallow. But I just don't think. I'm just going to reiterate everything you've been saying is and has validated a lot of things for me most importantly is you are not ready for an AI SOC if you don't have the detection engineering fundamentals in place and under control. Like you're that is just not what you want to be doing. Unfortunately, for organizations that have large SOCs and they just start throwing money at all of these different new AI initiatives, it comes from the board
Yep.
that they have to now show an AI enabled tech stack. They're enticed by something like this.
Yeah, I think so. But and that's why I think it's even for the bottom portion of this, get the skills to build, right? So you're never going to have,
Yeah.
again, you're never going to have perfect visibility and perfect detection engineering. But even if you have minimal, and let's say this is where your executive leadership comes in. If the strategy is you have X sum of money and the AI tool that you buy, or and plus the tool of the dependencies like you're seeing,
Hmm.
or within that budget, then maybe you can get better at the foundationals, and you say the foundationals are part of that dependency. But you have to tie that back off to that risk and maturity model. And I think others have really talked about it in detection as code and other initiatives over time, even detection engineering CMMIs, right? And yeah, including this one. This one's a pretty popular, set of blogs and diagrams. Everyone is going to have a different one.
Yeah.
So I think the most important aspect of the sell is you're going to have to do both. There's no question.
Yeah.
But to get those skills and get the justification of all that money in to get both tools at the same time as you struggle versus one or the other, to get that support, you need to actually convert those into dollar savings amounts in efficiency because you're almost always a cost center when you're a security operations team.
Yeah, and also to tie it back to the very beginning thing that we talked about is the alert precision versus generic trade-off. I think these have become very popular because we have to make our detection so incredibly narrow, not because narrow is better, but because it fundamentally catches more threats. Uh, but that when you have a team that can only handle a certain amount of alerts per day, the bottleneck becomes the human and the resources that you have against monitoring alerts, or how you were talking about how many alerts can you put a ratio on it. And that was a way to offset with an AI SOC the actual coverage, the actual consumption of helping your team address the alert fatigue problem, spreading apart the analysis between a human and then them also covering your alert queue if you've got thousands of queues of an alert queue coming in. But again, not how is it even better if it doesn't truly understand? Maybe it is. Maybe, who knows? The marketing behind I think is a little bit ahead. They're claiming that they do fully automate like up to level 2 closing of alerts and you're done. It doesn't even get a final review of an analyst, but well, a lot to unfold in this space.
Yeah, I think it's just going to be your risk reward factor, right? Because
Yeah.
everyone's going to have you be building some sort of agentic something, right? If you're not AI
Yeah.
something, you're already behind, and supposedly candidates or customers are no longer looking at you. I think what the issue is, if you're going to start with anything, and if you're on the fence about implementing any kind of agentic stock AI initiative, start with the most basic thing that you're allowed to have. Let's say you GPT Enterprise, and you can just use this chatbot. Upload your playlist to
Yes.
it, right? And then you use it as a corpus of knowledge to shore up your lack of recall capability. So for a human, the lack of recall is not how you measure that in the precision for the F1 score. It's the how much knowledge do you really know and have you mastered. Now, there's something to be said about LLMs being trained at up to 25% of their training data is based on Reddit, but if it's pretty good about
That's wild.
calculating all these other things, right? And like helping you
Yeah.
understand what the hell you're looking at. So if you're a level one analyst, you've been giving a registry hive, you don't know what these HKLMs are, and you don't understand these CSLIDs. Maybe these are the go-to points where you don't have a senior analyst that's got that huge breadth of mastery. It's like having that true co-pilot right there that you can start off with if you have to use some sort of AI initiative and slap the word AI on it and then tell your C levels. But if you want to take it to that agentic side, start with a single function AI agent. Start with one that you can run semi-locally or in a cron job somewhere, and just let it either focus on enrichments, right? And you can show reduction that way and coverage at the same time, or you can also let it run pseudo analysis, right? And so you really have to prompt engineer something going based on the past tickets. This is likely this case because it had these additional keywords, and these additional keywords in this word cloud are what we use for this weights, and then it gives you a suggestive, next set of steps. So this is essentially what Gemini does with Google SecOps built in and every scene now. So maybe start with some of that if you need to homegrown it, or just activate that feature inside your tooling.
So stepping stone into the co-pilot that comes with your sim, because yeah, you're right. Everyone has one now. Even Splunk has
Oh
one
yeah,
now.
right.
Yeah.
So I mean, yeah, that's one way to kind of put it. And if you can find a way to, I don't know how you're going to do it. You have to really look at your case management, get those metrics out of there, and provide those hard numbers to your leadership. That's another way of doing it.
That is true. I want to promo your book a little bit. To our listeners today, you can find Dennis's book, Automating Security Detection Engineering, which is a hands-on guide to applying a lot of the principles you can clearly tell that he's talked about today. I've read the book. It's a fantastic, quick read actually, and you can hear it. You can download it. You can as an ebook, which is if you have a Rakuten Kobo, you absolutely can download it on there because it supports EPUB format. Or you can download the physical copy, which I don't have one, but I don't have a signed physical copy. But it's fine. I'll keep reading it in my Kobo because you can highlight as well. You'll be able to purchase it today with a discount code exclusively here on Dispatch using the code PACKTEBOOK, but specifically from packedpub.com, which I'll put in the show notes. And Dennis, I appreciate the time today. It's truly a milestone of mine to get you on our podcast. I've been trying to get you on since like last year. So I really appreciate all the insights. And I wanted to also promote the fact that you are writing a new book. What is the new book going to be about? And is the offensive researcher that you introduced me yesterday, are you writing the book with him?
Correct. So I wrote, and I'll let you on a little script. I wrote a lot of the chapters. So Michael LaSalvia, he's also a co-author. He's written a good chunk of the book as well. He's an active red team manager and practitioner. He also made a bunch of OSCP study YouTube items in there. I think his handle is GenX Web. And like that's where people get their OSCPs and OSCEs and dare I say GX pins for training material as well.
Look at that.
Yeah, he's a SME on this. So we have a red team tool development book. So all the things that we talk about Agentic AI and how to use Agentic AI to start making better detections, you're going to need that because this book is going to come and make every what I call entry to mid-level detection engineer just sweat.
Ooh.
Yeah, so I make it extremely difficult to evasion payload. So if you're still working on indicator-based detections, you're going to have a hard time if you're going to try to detect anything from this book. So you need to use behavior-based technology, which I have at the latter portion of that book, to kind of subsequent that.
That's right. That's right. And that was our state of detection engineering report, as you know, as a quoter yourself, is also in the works. We are finalizing the last few questions before getting it out, and that was that was one of the biggest results from last year is the shift to behavioral types of detections. But actually, a couple of episodes ago, I brought up a topic where it was like, have we swung the pendulum too far? Have we hyperfixated now on behavioral detections that maybe we've left the IOCs out of the picture?
No, I mean, look, there's always room for both, right? Just like you can just have
Yeah.
one or the other. Indicator-driven detections are really temporal, right? And so everyone
Yeah.
might say, "Oh, I'm going to stop doing that." Well, yeah,
Yeah. Time to live is like this.
yeah, right. But if you're using only indicators and only one indicator at a time, that of course is very short. But if you're using more indicators for every detection, you're increasing that lifetime for a little while more. On top of that, what are you going to create for behaviors if you have barely enough security research that comes out with a 0 day? You have to create something to deploy as an emergency patch or an emergency detection. And so that's still going to be a valid use case for that duration. So let's say it lasts full utilization for a week. But if you look at threat actors that are not 0 dayers, but they're like they take the outcomes from 0 days and look for opportunistic exploitation, you still have a good life cycle half-life of at least another month or two, right? So you don't have to
Yeah.
fully deprecate it. And then you have that threat intelligence, right? That becomes threat intelligence for later. And so if you know how to like convert that use case and make it to different systems, which unfortunately I have to use the word AI is easier to do that. Uh, you can finally get that metric back in there. And so there is life after death for an indicator-based detection, but it turns it back into the threat intelligence lifecycle, which is part of our third book, and another one with PACT later on this year.
I'm growing this thesis that I think that the role of indicators in detection is changing. I think it's changing from being the source of an alert to maybe just a piece of the context. Like it's being mainly just used as an enrichment after the fact, like you've been saying. For example, like if an IP hit is that all of a sudden becomes more meaningful if it's enriched with, for example, is it a Tor node and is it an outbound to a consumer cloud? Like that, I'm almost trying to behavioralize IOCs in a way.
Well, actually, you're right. So when you think about, if you talk with any threat intelligence analyst, and I'm not a threat intel analyst, but if you talk with them, right, they have this whole profile of threat actors. You think about their psychology, where they come from. Some of them, if you look at Lazarus and Lapsus and all these other people that have gotten caught, they have complex social norm issues. They have these things. They leave their little calling cards, or they put false flags anywhere. But they're human too, right? There's always a pattern. They can't have true entropy everywhere else. And so what I'm finding is, you can take those little indicator-based items, and if you're tying them back to some form of attrition to, let's say, not even a full person, but like a group, and K means that, you can have variations fuzzed using AI or future regression, and then create either a bunch of indicator-based detections, or you create like a more behavioral-based detection from that. So it's like recycling the indicators, but you're using it based on what you mentioned, the behaviors of the actual threat actors. They always have something that is attributed to them in some funky way,
Back to
right?
them. Yeah,
Some of them use like VX Underground. He's all about cats or something, so he's probably going to have some sort of weird cat
totally.
indicator.
That's their thing. Yeah,
Yeah, so
yeah.
some of them have done Stego C2, right, with Hammer and some of the other threat actors. So there's always going to be something to them. So if you use
That's
indicators
true.
as retrofitting for future-based forecasting, which I mentioned earlier, you can actually reuse them. And so that's the recyclable portion versus discarding them completely.
That also reminds me of David Burkett's research on Magonia, research on like fuzzy hash
Oh yeah.
similarities. It's like comparing like previous hashes just by a little bit deviation, and that also is behavioralizing IOCs.
Oh, that's cool.
But
I'm not smart enough to do all the math to fuzz that correctly. So
I'm sure you are. I'm sure you are. You are now on your third book. When can we expect this book? And what is our next topic on dispatch, Dennis? Before I let you go.
okay, so the second book will probably be ready by DEF CON with No Starch with Michael Tapia. So
Excellent.
we could probably talk about the offensive side and maybe red team evasion of detections and what you need to do. So an extension on this. But
Maybe we can film an episode at DEF CON if you're gonna go.
you know what? I might actually pay to go do it out of my own pocket for fun. So let me know, right? And do it live. The third book is going to be with my current coworkers. So Austin Nowak is a co-author. He's our senior data scientist, and Joe Fleury is our director of intelligence operations here at UKG. So it's a full UKG co-authored book. We're going to apply AI using obviously Gen AI, but also the traditional AI as well. So more the ML side, get all the evals and have almost production level. I say almost production level code for you to take back and apply to your threat intelligence program, where you still have humans in the loop, but also have a very deep and enriched version of that, so you can actually create those indicators and those recycling portions back to your detection engineers.
Well, look at that.
Yeah.
That well, I can't wait. I do hope you end up making it over to DEF CON. It's I will say though, it's getting a little bit crowded. More and more. I think it's outgrowing the Las Vegas Convention Center, and it's almost impossible to make it to all of
The
the
villages.
the workshops. Yeah, that there's overlapping workshops, like 5 at a time. It's just it's getting out of control.
Yeah, I mean, you
But
kind of have to really pick and choose. I try to send my top tier analysts or engineers there, and I'm like, you go TLDR what you found for me and split it. But tell you what, and I'll put it out there because it's public. I'll foot my own bill and fly my own way out there. You get me a pass out there. We'll do like,
I'll get you a
yeah,
pass. Oh
you can
yeah.
do hot seat if you want, and I'll do what I can, and yeah, we'll do this.
Fabulous. Well, there you have it, y'all. One thing I do want to say is to warn you about is I think that after this episode, you're going to have a lot of people wanting to work for you and see if you're hiring, because the kind of team dynamic you've built and what I've been hearing that you co-authoring with several members of your team, you're showcasing the work, the way you've spoken about a lot of people that have architected what you've built is just super admirable and inspiring. So RIP your inbox. But thank you so much again. There you have it, folks. If your alerts are shit, AI is not going to save you. Get your detection engineering fundamentals right, and you can do that by automating security detection engineering with this discounting code. For those that are listening on Spotify, Apple Music, make sure you rate, subscribe, and also follow Dennis Chow on LinkedIn. I don't think you're on Medium. I tried looking for your social media to tag, but I don't think you have any other social
Well,
media.
I have GitHub, and I have Medium too. So GitHub DC401, and then
There you
Medium
go.
DW Chow.
Awesome. Until next time, y'all.
All right. Thank you.